out the doctor-nurse relationship, counselor-doctor-nurse training. So that kind of professional empathy training was out. So it seemed to kind of be quite focused still, not only in social work, but in, I guess, the helping profession. That's the best thing I can use to describe it. That was his invalshoek, his point of focus.
Okay.
His hook, yeah, that's good. That was his hook.
Well, I started off with the definition, so I went through, and we have our categories. So as I was reading, I kept trying to put stuff into these categories, and so we had the definitions. He references cognitive empathy and affective empathy, and then the references of Kartoff and Trucks and Hodges and Myers, and he also talks about the thing that we come up with all the time is this real problem. He says one of the tensions in studying empathy relates to the way empathy is defined. Currently, no consensus exists on how to define empathy and how it functions and manifests in interpersonal relationships, or how to train or measure it. It's like the whole thing. There's no, it's like this conceptual fragmentation, which informs this inquiry, confounds a comprehensive definition of empathy and contributes to inadequate methodology and measurements of outcomes of training programs. So I had interviewed Paul Ekman, and he said, I was interested in compassion. To get the compassion, I had to go into empathy, study empathy. And he said it's a total mess. It's a confusing total mess. And then I had interviewed Marco Iacoboni, who did the book Mirroring People, and he was saying the same thing. He says there's a need for one academic to just devote themselves to creating a typology. And he says he's been telling all his colleagues that, nobody's grabbing hold of that. So
because it is really interesting, because and also because things are termed different ways and they define it differently, but they're different aspects at different times depending on it is quite confusing, and you do have to select something to hold on to, but it would be. Does anybody know if anybody's working on that now?
Not that I know of.
Well, it seems like that there are different schools, and I think the different schools are becoming more pronounced. It's a little bit like when for example in the 600 after Christ, when Muhammad wrote the Quran and received the Quran, then I think that it was 10 years after that the Shiites and the Sharia started, and you had the first Schisma. So I think in the great religious battle for empathy, you have also the different schools. You have the perception action model advocates around Stephanie Preston and Levinson Roof, who basically claim that empathy is automatic and comes from the mirror neurons. And then you have the Singer group, who basically say there is nothing like cognitive empathy. You only have emotional empathy, and you only have compassion in a way. And I guess then you have Nancy Eisenberg, and who's a little more, I've forgotten what exactly she says, but I think she goes more in the direction that you have the three kinds. You have emotional empathy, you have cognitive empathy, and you have motor empathy. I think she's a candidate of the three kinds of the three modes of empathy school.
But then you also have like Jamil Zaki, who adds this interactive component too. They describe that also on page 19. I thought that was a really nice addition. I hadn't seen that before. I've seen the behavioral component, but
I thought so too. But then I read 2010 Jennifer Goetz. I don't know. She has gotten a German name, Goetz. She is, but she researches. She's probably American, Jennifer Götz, and she wrote a paper on compassion. Well, she called it compassion, but basically she gave a motivated account of empathy 4 years before Zaki. And Zaki builds on her paper, and he cites her, so he doesn't hush up the fact that she thought about that before.
Well, I know there's a big discussion in the therapeutic community, and a lot of people kind of resist the scientific study of it because they say, well, how do you measure empathy? How do you measure things like love? How do you measure things like affection? How do you measure feelings? And I think there's one study that measured from the Rogerian point of view, and they basically had people self-report. So they would say, how high on a scale from 1 to 10 do you feel empathy towards, blah, blah, blah. So you have to rely on what people tell you, which is, of course, you know, extremely unreliable. But there's a study that I'm trying to find, and they did a measurement in around how much does empathy affect the outcome of psychotherapy, for example. And it wasn't that high. It was like, yes, it does have a positive outcome, but it wasn't like through the roof that empathy is like the one criteria. But it was just, okay, it helps, but there's other factors too.
A very good point, Gertie, that there's a fourth school, the psychotherapy school, around Carl Rogers and Heinz Kohut, who were kind of against measuring at them. Yeah, so we have 4 schools maybe, and probably
which doesn't fly anymore. I mean, even the therapeutic community acknowledges that they have to go with the signs of the time and say that we do have to try to pin it down scientifically.
Well, I mean, most.
It was it seems to me that there could be a lot more clarity created around this. That it wouldn't be that hard. Like Marco Iacoboni was saying, it takes someone to just really work it through, and I think create those models to integrate it. You know, Dan Batson gave it a try. You know, because he kind of laid out the eight steps of 8 parts of empathy. So he has a paper that I think is one of the most geared towards defining empathy, and I did an interview with him where we actually talked about each of the steps. So we went through all 8, and I didn't understand it at the time, but I just kind of listened, you know, to a lot of what he was saying, because it was kind of hard for me to grasp some of it at that time. And his approach is, you know, before you start talking about it, define your terms. So everybody, before you start talking about it, just define what you're talking about and then stick to it. So that was his kind of final conclusion of how to address, you know, that issue. The other thing is, you know, we have 2 columns here, definers, you know, on the left hand of the Lit Review. So every time I find one of these definitions, I've been creating a reference to it and then excerpting it so that you can go down the list and just see, you know, the definers, you know, what the paper was. So just have a full list of how everybody's defining it. And it seems like something like that could just keep growing into a like a typology, you know, that Marco Iacoboni is talking about. That, you know, if we could model it eventually, and I feel it's like beyond my resources to, you know, do it like in a short term, but, you know, to have clear models to be, because I still am confused when people talk about cognitive empathy, what the heck they're talking about. One moment they're talking about sort of a perspective taking, and another moment they're talking about imagining being in someone else's shoes. And for me, they're like 2 different things. So it's like, anyway, it's very confusing. And then there's also definitions. So as I come up across terms, I've just been adding a term like, you know, aesthetic empathy, effective empathy, appropriate response, cognitive empathy, compassion, emotional regulation. and the list is getting pretty long, towards all the terms. But then I'm kind of copying, what somebody said, about that term, and then keep building, and then kind of try to reference back. So at least we can, start getting, at least that moving towards a typology. I guess that's the best word I have for it, is creating a typology and something you can. And you had some great definition. I mean, you've read a lot, it sounds like, Sasha, so you've got a good perspective of how a lot of this is coming together.
Well, I mean, with the typology, some even tried it. If I might share my screen with you, I cut out this. I cut out. Can you see that?
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That is from Franz de Waal. He and Stephanie Preston, they developed the Russian doll model of empathy.
Yeah.
And have you also read it, Melissa?
Yeah, well, he's a very famous Dutch scientist dealing with primates at Emory University. Yeah.
And when he and Stephanie Preston they brought out this paper in 2002 about the perception action model, some really hailed, oh, this is so nice that you actually want to bring order into the chaos, but others really ripped the paper apart. It is really hard to get. It cost me 50 euros to download it, because in my university library they only had it at. It was published in the in some really high-class journal, and they have such a stupid format for this journal. You cannot put it under an ordinary copy machine. So anyway, I got the electronic format, and it was so heavily digitally write managed that I only could print out one copy, and then the document destroyed itself. And
wow, wow,
that's so funny.
Very precious.
Yeah.
So they came up with the Russian doll model, which I think is pretty neat. So they say, and in the center we have the perception action model, which in essence is what people tell you with the mirror neurons, only a little more refined. Basically, that whenever you watch our brain, just view somebody acting, the same brain regions in our brain just also start to fire up. And by that process, that is a core process, motor mimicry and emotional contagion. And from there on, that is the innermost doll. And from there on, all the other phenomena which we summarize under the name empathy come to be. And that is sympathetic concern, empathic concern, perspective taking, altruistic behavior, imitation, emulation, coordination, and all this and that.
But doesn't this kind of stem from also a view that this is an internal kind of biological response, a biological mechanism that kicks this all off, and that it's not learned behavior, that it's really an internal something, and that I know that could be part of it, but I thought most of his work was really focused on that, and not the the aspects which are learnable or trainable. That everything he says just stems from being.
Yeah. He does say that these perception action imitation, that the mirror neurons firing is actually the basis, and everything stems from that. Also, even the most complex perspective taking, which is a very complex thing, also has its roots that we can mirror somebody else's emotions, and that is basically their theory. Now, then, in 2006, Tanya Singer and a French guy, which name I can look up if you like to, which I forgot the name, Vic. Something with V. They came up with. She was saying that, and she might have been one of the first who was saying that from the hardcore scientific community, so to speak, that this automatic empathy just won't do it, because so often we don't behave in an empathic way, although we see suffering. So it must be motivated in a way. And from there on, the whole discussion on motivation started to go into the psychologist and neuroscientist domain, which, of course, interestingly enough, psychotherapists and others knew ages before, that you have to be motivated to be empathic. So
I think the two aren't they're not exclusively mutually exclusive. That with that perception, the model that's the kind of the model I kind of operate from. I think kind of at the core is a perception action model, and George Lakoff, I think, is also kind of has done work around that. That it's this basic automatic function of mirror neurons that's happening. But I think the part that's maybe not being that could be integrated is that we have also basic functions like fear, and that the basic function of fear blocks those automatic it's what I was talking about yesterday in terms of the model of the sea urchin. The sea urchin's out there waving its little tentacles in the world, and then so it's just got if we use that kind of mirror neurons, kind of going, kind of tapping into the world, and then you kind of poke it, and it totally shuts down. And the automatic function of the mirror neurons is inhibited by the contraction and I would even say like physical contraction. Like when I'm open, I can physically feel the bodily, my body being loose, right? Because I can feel the relaxation in my body, which is kind of opening. And when I'm fearful or stressed, I can feel contraction in my body. So in terms of the automatic, what I'm thinking is like the automatic functioning of the mirror neurons is inhibited by stress and tension. So if we're seeing each other, if I'm seeing you now with your hand on your head on your here, so I'm seeing your smile, and I can actually feel your smile, right, when you're doing that.
Yeah.
And so that's because I start mirroring your face, because you're like full screen here.
Yeah.
So I can feel your face like lighting up with humor, right? So, but if I'm highly stressed, it's going to inhibit the mirroring that's happening of me with you, and I'm not even going to feel, as deeply. So I think that anyway. I guess that's I kind of really resonate with that model. In fact, I even got my own little Russian doll to explain it to people. I actually have been using it, and I actually had it labeled, cognitive empathy. We're going down, to the different levels here. So I got these from China. You can order these, kind of from China. So we got the kind of little guys, and they go all the way down. So. And there's a little.
That's when they're meant to be painted,
Yeah, the Russian, right. There's the core of the, what do they call it? Russian dolls or whatever. So. Matryoshka.
That's so funny. Those would be wonderful giveaways at a conference.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. That would mean that you actually believe in that model very strongly. So.
Yeah.
But I do so myself. I think it's the most plausible in a way, but then again, I also, after I read the accounts of Tanya Singer and Jennifer Götz and also Zaki, I came more to think of that this the most inner goal is like an offering, something that we can choose to follow. But if we are guided by fear, as you rightly said, or by greed, or by a desire to punish somebody, for example, if I think
anger.
that my anger, or if I know, or anger, but also
Revenge.
like righteous indignation. Somebody has wronged you, and you want to punish that person, and the person starts to cry. Nevertheless, in that moment you feel, okay, that person has done wrong, I'm going to punish that person, and I'm going to shut off my empathy, because the punishment is for the person's good. like the classical punitive thinking. Or,
I think Saki talks about that too. Didn't you get the sense that he's also saying, yeah, there is this automatic part, but there's also the other part too, so that they're not.
Yeah.
We can actually integrate them. I think that they all really integrate pretty
It does,
well,
yeah,
actually.
yeah.
I think it flows all the time between
Hmm.
feeling states. That I really like, Sasha, what you said. You're offering something, because sometimes you're just neutral and you're listening, even though you are in the other person's head. But sometimes
Hmm.
you offer warmth and understanding, and that is still different from feeling the other person's feeling. And it constantly flows back and forth, and sometimes you're just so wrapped up in your own world that you got nothing, but you're still empathizing on a cognitive level. And I think it's very tricky to, or it's difficult to put it in these categories, because it flows from minute to minute, really, depending on what you hear and whether you are triggered or not, or it's a constant interaction between two people and not just one person feeling empathy for the other.
Yeah, so it's a complex relationship that's going on. That so I was talking with someone too. It's like how even as the person being listened to, they can do things that can deepen the empathy that someone else will feel. So in terms of being being more open and transparent about what your felt experience is can actually help. So it's just not the empathizer, just this one-way thing, and there's a whole complicated interaction that's happening, and both parties can actually support that. So maybe it's looking at that's what we were talking about yesterday, was the overall relationship. It's just not this individual, but it's almost like we need to look at the biology of multiple relationships and what's happening in multiple relationships. Does that make sense? That was just a new thought I had about the biology of multiple relationships. I hadn't thought about that before, so that was fun.
Put that in your list of definitions. We have a new term.
What do I call that? Social empathic biology.
And not sociopathic.
Well, don't call it a social field, because that's where Otto Scharmer is always. That's his very ominous and hard to understand term, the social field. But I think he dwells also on the interconnectedness between the different persons, right?
Yeah, it's feeling the full field of relationships, right? You're feeling.
Yeah.
Actually, we feel the field. I feel the field of all of us relating. So there's different things happening between different energies I feel towards each of you, and different concerns, or is one person being able to speak? Are they feeling left out? What's the relationship between everyone? So thinking of the kind of this whole field.
Which is really interesting. And when you guys were talking about this, my head was kind of distracted back to this article, this dissertation, thinking, if this is so interactive and if this is such a process between two and it's not a singular thing for one to experience, or it's not one directional at all, why are so many of these assessment methods really only self-assessment? I mean, there's very, very few studies who look at both of the persons involved in this interaction, and also the observation of the both. It's very, very rare that you see good studies that are taking that into account, and I think that is also one of the criticisms that he makes here. But yeah, it's an interesting question. It's kind of like a money where your mouth is thing. It's, if this is so transactional, why isn't the transaction being studied? I know that there are a few approaches there. I mean, they talk empathic communication, but I don't see very many studies who really measure that.
No, there's not. It's like that, measuring that whole social field, right? Is that what you're kind of saying? It's like you're seeing studies that are studying kind of this individual, from an individualistic point of view, and they're not studying the whole empathic social field. Is that kind of what you're saying, or am I just?
Well, I mean, they look at how well a participant the receiver of information reacts to the sender of the information. So how well, for example, a doctor responds to the patient. Sometimes they ask the patient how well did the doctor respond. They don't also ask the doctor at the same moment how well they thought about the same interaction at the same moment, and compare both understandings of that interaction at the same time, let alone have an observer also look at the same situation to see, do they all look at this interact? Do they value this differently? Do they experience it differently? Because that's also a misconnect. I mean, if I think I'm being incredibly empathic and a really great listener, but I'm really not, and you don't feel it that way, and somebody observing feels it some completely other way, then yeah, I could say I'm a highly empathic person, but yeah, I'm not. So I self-assess myself as being very high on that scale.
Can you read German, Melissa? I just put in the link of a dissertation I read here in Germany, and it is a guy, Daniel Schmelzer, but it's in German, and he coined a term which I found very interesting that goes in the direction that you were saying, but because he was measuring what he called empathic cycles. He called them empathic cycles. Because he had the rare opportunity for his dissertation. He has done it for the economic department of the University of Munich, and they had really tons of video footage of startups, of the management team of startups. And so he was analyzing empathetic cycle within these management teams. So he had exactly that situation that you were talking about. Somebody was initiating an empathic action, and he was able to analyze how the reaction was, how it was going back and forth, and he called them empathic cycles. And then, of course, he didn't have the opportunity to interview people afterwards because it was video footage. But still, the concept was very interesting of looking at the full cycle of empathy, of receiving, giving, receiving empathy, giving empathy, receiving feedback, giving feedback, and so forth.
Because there was one study in the paper, I could look it up, but there's one study in the paper that does talk about that, or maybe it's another study, I don't know, my head's kind of full right now, but talking about this, observing the interactions and having an external third party observe what they see. But it'd be so cool to be able to take what he did in that study, this Schmelzer, and add the concept and add the aspect of an evaluative aspect from the participants themselves. Really quite interesting. I am going to try to Google Translate that document. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so it's a matter of looking at the field.
I'll let one of my German colleagues help me with translating that one.
There's with Carl Rogers, his approach was to do empathic listening kind of as a client therapist. So it's very kind of transactional. You're the client, I'm the therapist. And then his grad student, Gene Genlin, studied like the client. What is the client doing that has the most growth? And his insight was that it was the clients who spoke from felt experience, that they didn't stay in their kind of cognitive thought process, but they talked about what was the feelings that they had. Like, I got depression. Where's the depression? What does it feel like? What are the other feelings? How is it that, when I talk about it as it gets heard, how it transforms? So he was seeing that it's not just the therapist listening, kind of in this, it's also that the client is doing something. So this kind of expands to the whole field that we're talking about, is that to increase that whole empathic field is that everybody has a role to do. The more honest and open and transparent everyone can be, it's what's going to foster the whole field of empathy. And there's all kinds of different ways that we can approach it. Like yesterday, I was like ranting against academics, my frustration, but I could have spoken more deeply about it's not just my judgments about the academia, I called it hogwash. Some of these concepts, it's like, so I kind of like had a judgment, right? I judged the, and I was aware of it because that's fun to judge. But I could have said, well, my feelings, I feel frustration about this because I feel I have a need for openness and acceptance and broad-mindedness, and that feeling is not being met. So that brings in some of the tools from, like, NVC. I could actually be deepening. I could be myself doing more self-empathy. So I think I'm just really seeing it's great to talk about this field of empathy and how we each have a role. I mean, there's things that each person can do within that field to increase the full field of empathy. So
what I find really interesting, though, I mean, when we talk about interpersonal communication at all, there have to be some boundaries to, where are we talking about empathy and where are we talking about interactions in general? Where are we talking, I don't know. I think so many things can be connected to this because this is so fundamental that I think it's very, very natural, but also dangerous to grow so broad, because I think, well, that's the problem with defining empathy in general. I mean, we have to kind of focus it down to the core. I look a little bit like a scary monster here with my... I'm sorry, it's like Frankenstein in the lab. So I'm going to grow it down to the core. But yeah, I mean, when I pick up my Joe DeVito Basics of Interpersonal Communication textbook, empathy is mentioned as really important on page 7, and then it doesn't happen anywhere else in the whole textbook. And I think people kind of brush this off as, yeah, empathy is important. Okay, here are a whole bunch of other things that have to do with other things, but yeah, no one really. I don't know. It's just, it gets to be too big all of a sudden, and I'd like to bring it.
You're finding it's too large of a concept, and you're wanting to find something smaller and manageable. Or is it like, are you feeling overwhelmed and you're needing kind of more clarity or more focus? Or
well, I think even if you look at the Matryoshka doll, even if you look at that model, if you look at anything, I think you have, things are interrelated. That's life. I mean, everything is interrelated in some respect. But I think when you talk about one single concept, I think it is important to consistently and carefully and with a lot of clarity define what that means. And of course, there are different schools of thought, and there are different approaches, and there are different ways of looking at the same thing. But still, it's this one thing called empathy. And I fear if we look at a far bigger human interaction in general, that we're going to lose this, this one focus. Maybe that's me.
Yeah, there's a couple of things that came up. One is, I call it my site the culture of empathy, so I think in that cultural terms, right? It's like when I think of these terms, I think of it like the multiple relationships of all humanity. So that's one part. I was thinking something that came up, a way to explore this is to do role-playing, there's to do empathic role-playing in the sense that you have whatever that piece of the focus is, that's almost like a thought, the way, I don't know if this is going to get confusing, but it's like like wanting focus, right? And I'm wanting kind of like this broad view, integration, and then for those two to have an empathic dialogue. So, for example, in one of our groups, a person in the group in one of the empathy circles said, "Oh, she had a feeling of creativity, like, oh, I had an idea, but then from the creativity, her judgment came in and said, oh, it's a terrible idea." So, and then that judgment of her terrible idea caused pain, like, oh, I'm in pain because I had this self-judgment, to the point where she didn't want any more creative ideas. right? It's like, because if I have a creative idea, I judge it, and then I have pain, and it's like a vicious cycle. So I guess so what we did is we did role play where I became her creativity and somebody else in the group became her her judgment, and for 45 minutes we had a dialogue, me being her creativity, saying, oh, this is so fun, I'm really enjoying myself, and then her judgment would reflect what the creativity was saying. Oh, you're having fun, you're enjoying yourself, and then it would be the turn of the judgment to speak, and then the creativity would reflect what the judgment was saying. So we had the different parts of herself, sort of like that inner family constellation, doing empathic listening. And it was like really transformational for her. It was like integrating her own internal thoughts. So I'm just saying that as a methodology that could be used in kind of this exploration, that we could even bring in processes like that. And if you're having like a conflict between these two parts, like I want, oh, let's have broad, you know, and you're saying, oh, we've got to have really focused, so you can have an empathic dialogue between those two components. So I'm just throwing that out there because that was one thought that kind of popped up.
And I think in the end, life can be really simple if you just, you know, if you just, of oneself decides to go for a certain school with well-placed argument. Of course, I mean, nobody expects us in a dissertation to actually, you know, create the all-true empathy formula, which would be nice. But in the end, you know,
redefine life in 100 pages.
Yes.
I think it was 64, wasn't it? And
yeah. Not here, unfortunately, Edwin. It's a little bit more than that.
Oh, I will have to write 200. You know, that's
yes.
even more.
I have to publish 5 articles.
Oh, you have to. Oh, articles are harder than monography. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
okay, no sympathy necessary. No sympathy necessary.
There is, you know, I've talked with George Lakoff, who I got a lot from, and his view. He says empathy is a core progressive value, and conservative, the core progressive value is kind of this authoritarian sort of power over, and he's saying that progressive have more of a systems view, that you see, like in terms of responsibility, that we have responsibility for the whole, versus a conservative view is we're all individuals and we all have individual responsibility. So if somebody does a crime, it's all their fault and all their personal responsibility. So I think that might be a little bit here too, is that it can be an empathy as from a very personal way, or an empathy from kind of a social way, and I think they can be integrated, though.
Well, I mean, this kind of progressive, conservative thinking, I think that's a very American thing, in a way. But you know, then he brings a different value. I mean, empathy as a value, I think, is something totally different than you would value empathic or compassionate or caring action, right? In a way.
Yeah, and for me, I have to be quite frank. I'm not looking at this less as a value than as a skill, as something teachable, something trainable, and you know, something that can be better. So I'm not trying to put a judgment around empathy or to yeah, again, we all look at this from a bit different. We all have a little different hook, a little different angle. But we're still, I think
I'm sorry, I have to go. I just wanted to sneak out. Good to talk to you. I'll see you on Monday. You too. Bye.
See you.
Bye, Gertie.
Bye.
Bye. Yeah, I think that's the crux about empathy, is that many people use the term on many different levels. that you can use it on a neuroscientific level, on a neurological level. You can use it on a social level. You can use it, and then you would use it as a value or as a norm, and you can use it on a personality trait level. The empathy trait or compassion trait, they seem to be synonymous. Empathy as a trait, as a personality trait. And then you have the state empathy, which is something that you watch as on a neurological or the psychological way, and they both seem to be related. The state and trait empathy, they have somewhat a connection, although it doesn't seem to be, as far as I have read, not that strong as you might think. That people who are high on trait empathy, who value empathy and say they think you should act empathic and they have a tendency to do so, they might not always act in such a way.
What's the difference between state and, what are you saying, state empathy, and what was the other one?
Trait.
How do you see, what's the difference between the two? I didn't clarify.
Well, state empathy is that trait empathy is that which you can actually measure. You walk down the street and you see a person smiling, suffering, whining, being sad, being happy, and that puts you in an empathic state. You vicariously experience that person's emotion right on the spot. That would be state empathy. You are in an empathic state.
So
trait empathy.
When I was seeing you with your hands here, and I was mentioning that I was feeling kind of the resting, and then I was seeing your smile, and I was feeling your smile, and your smile actually lit up more and more, and I could feel the intensity of it. So you would call that state empathy.
Yeah, you were in an empathic state, and that
tuning into your felt experience. Okay.
Right. And trait empathy is your general disposition as as a person to behave in an empathic way. That would be your trait empathy. So you have people are. For example, the Davis actually measures trait empathy. He doesn't measure state empathy. He asks people different questions. So, do you feel sad when you feel other persons? Do you feel this when you watch somebody cry in the movies? Do you feel with the person? And when you read about a hero conquering the evil villain, do you feel with a hero? So that would be fantasy empathy. So he asks about dispositional empathy. He asks about your general disposition towards empathic states. And your general disposition to behave with empathic concern, for example. No? Do you feel an impetus to act when you see a person suffering? That is among his questions to measure your tendency to show empathic concern.
So he's kind of measuring tendencies towards being empathic?
Yeah.
So it's like, what is your tendency, like, or disposition towards?
Yeah.
What do you call what I'm doing? I'm saying, kind of like an evangelist. We got to have a more empathic world, folks, for our survival. We need a. Is there a term for that? Fanatic or fanatic empathy?
Evangelistic empathy. I think you have it right.
What is it?
Evangelistic empathy?
Evangelistic empathy.
You should not call yourself the website The Culture of Empathy. You should call it the Church of Empathy.
The Empathy Evangelist, yes. That's so funny.
I think I mean, when you're high in trait empathy, then of course, what Paul Davis says, then actually you're prone to be in more empathic states when it actually counts, or your motivation will be higher to be empathic when you actually see a person suffering, or that's what he says. but still having a disposition doesn't necessarily mean that it's actually going to happen. It doesn't actually, as we learned, that empathy is also motivational. Even if you have a high disposition for empathy, for some reasons, be it that you're stressed or that you're anxious or whatever, you actually are not empathic towards a person, because although you have a disposition, you high in disposition empathy, at that particular moment in that particular situation, you shut off your empathy and you behave in a non-empathic way.
I think the direction I'm heading is sort of along what Dan Batson is saying, is define your terms up front. So like creating the term, an empathic way of being, which is what we talked about yesterday, and then start defining what it is. This is, so we're creating something, just saying, instead of trying to figure out what everybody else is talking about, which is good, and I feel that I learn a lot, this informs me, but it's like making our own statement, like an empathic way of being, what is it, how does it work, how do we foster it, and it's kind of like this identity that. So I mean, that's kind of, and this has been really good for clarity for me to kind of see this about the relational empathy, that an empathic, defining an empathic way of being is being that field of empathy in the relational part of it. So.
And I think many are sharing that vision, Edwin, because I mean a lot of the guys that have really research into empathy also have written books about how an empathic world is. Frans de Waal, for example, he did write a book which I did not read or buy yet, but he also wrote a book about the empathic world or something like that, which in essence is the age of empathy. And I really have to read this book because I think it's more nature's lesson for a kinder society. And
I think that's exactly what it is, to be really honest.
What's that?
What?
I think your perspective on what his book's focuses is correct.
Nature's lesson for a kinder society.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it might even be much more interesting than Rifkin's book, because Rifkin, after all, was just a journalist and he didn't do any research himself. At least that's what people in the scientific community say about him. And or other persons like Batson and Koch and Hoffman and all the other researchers that really had a true belief that with empathy the world can actually be a better place. So there is like that tradition among researchers into empathy to really think that an empathic way of being really can also have a transformational aspect in society, that showing more often state empathy, and because empathy, I mean, is a main trigger for altruistic behavior. And I think that is where empathy really becomes important. Empathy helps us to become altruistic, and it helps us to be pro-social. And
also,
with altruistic...
Also transformational, but also emancipatory.
Emancipatory, how?
Well, I mean, it's freeing. I think it's not that I'm focusing on that road, but when I think about empathy, I think about freedom as well, and understanding and getting rid of things that bind, and getting rid of things that hold people back. So I think it's emancipatory. I don't know how.
I love that term. Yeah, I see it too. It's like there was a young guy here that I became friends with. We did a design group together on using empathy, and I started teaching him empathic listening. And I would listen to him and just reflect back. Like I remember at a cafe, we're sitting there, and I'm saying, "Oh, so this is what you're saying. This is what you're saying." And it's like the more he said, it was like it was opening up more. And after, because I was just listening, and then after we were done, he says, "I've never been so deeply heard and felt so creative in all my life." It's in that my listening to him kind of, allowed him space to go deeper into himself and share more and more of who he was and kind of its true authenticity. So I see that for him it was like very emancipatory. It was freeing him up to share his deep core of thoughts and feelings without constricting himself.
But also, like you were speaking of, this empathy force for, to go into places with extreme polarized environments where, there's the central thing that tries to bring things together. I mean, you can, I don't know, maybe it sounds a little far-fetched, but, as if I use the word emancipation, but, you can imagine people who are not strong at understanding or trying to take the perspective of others, or really deeply trying to understand, or really have honed their empathy skill in a way that they are in some way kind of, well, suffering is the wrong word, but
burdened,
maybe.
Yeah, burdened, constricted.
Yeah, but this is going a little further than I'm comfortable going, because I'm really not looking at this from this way. But
well, you can actually, because in a way, it can be emancipatory if you define, and human beings are in essence, it is in the nature of a human being to be in part of a social group. Human beings are not individuals, and
no, and if you are in a group and excluded because you don't understand.
No, yes, right, and you cannot survive on your own. It is simply impossible. I mean, Charles Darwin saw it 10,000 of years ago. Adam Smith saw it. I mean, Adam Smith is always cited for his capitalistic things, but he has been a great researcher on empathy, and he had a very social stand. I found that very confining, that these neoliberals and who have been advocates that you have to make it on yourself and this and that is really against man's nature, because the human beings have always been group animals, social beings. Now, and as a social being, you can only function properly, as you rightly said, if you can do empathy, which in a way, is. I mean, there's a certain joke about it, because for a short time, it really it feels good to be individualistic. It feels good to shut yourself off from empathy, because empathy also creates a pull situation. You see somebody else is suffering, you see somebody else, and it pulls you in, and it commands you to act, and it commands you to actually alleviate that person's suffering. So empathy can create a lot of pull, and if you free yourself from empathy, you might experience some emancipatory freedom for a while. But this is also a little illusionary, because as a human being, you need others, you need your support group, you need contact, you need communication, you need empathy to thrive. So for true emancipation, you have to be empathic in a way. Otherwise, you're suffering, and you need to see a doctor who teaches you to be empathic.
This is so interesting. I wish I could stay longer and we could go through more of this. I can't, but sometimes, Sasha, I'm going to come over to Berlin and pick your brain for a long time. I think just sitting in a room is also so good for hours.
We had started with the definitions. We were just starting on the benefits. I think we're starting to hear some of the benefits, and we all have that column. So maybe we should pick up next time on the benefits of empathy. Is kind of where we left off. Would that work? Yeah. There's a whole list here of benefits, so I think that would stimulate a whole discussion as well. So. Would that work, Melissa? Next time we do.
I'm good. I mean, there's more though. There's more than just this one too. I mean, there's there's several more. There's so much to read. There's so much to think about.
It's a lifetime of study, so you gotta pace yourself. Well, we can keep putting papers. I keep adding stuff as I go along. I keep adding every time I come across a paper that seems relevant, I add it to the list. So it keeps growing. But I find a discussion good to go through this, kind of systematically. Like, would really love to talk about the benefits, but we still put in our papers as we go.
I mean, Butters may also make some really interesting points, which I've read so far, and he really, I mean, I liked his summary. To go back to Butters, that I really like the summaries that empathy trainings are effective. I think that is isn't it? That is really his conclusion, which offers great hope for those of us who are, designing empathy trainings, that they are indeed effective.
Yeah, it's something we can definitely use. But I know Melissa's got to go, so I don't want to keep you longer than. So, but I was just wondering, can we just have an agreement? No, just want to see, does that work? Do we pick up on the Butters on benefits? We get a up, down, sideways. How does everybody?
Yeah.
Unless you have another idea.
I'll add it for a third time. I'll go for a third time.
Okay. Be thorough. Okay, great. Then I just want to be sure that we know what we're doing next time. So, okay, good. Then that's clear. So, okay, we'll let you go. I don't want to keep you too late. I see it's getting late for both of you, probably.
Bye, Melissa. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
You've really done a lot of reading, Sasha. You really dig into this.
Yeah, well, the last 2 weeks I've all, we are just we are applying for EU project, and it's about gender and career orientation, which will give me. So for the last 3 weeks I couldn't do so much reading, but I'm really getting ahead now. I feel that I read most of the most important papers. Of course, not all the most important papers, because there's just too many of them, but at least most of the most important ones. And
what is the EU project again? What it's like trying to get a grant for doing something around refugees, or
no, gender equality in EU wants to attract young women into men's jobs and young men into women's jobs. Classical women jobs, like more men to become male nurses and more women to become I don't know, mechanics and math professors and stuff like that.
And what would you do? What would be your role?
Well, in the project, I would be the scientific coordinator. I would coordinate. Well, I mean, we don't have fixed roles yet. We are 3 persons, and we are the core project team. And now we have to secure funds, and we have to secure other project partners around Europe. And but if all works out, we get 600 million euros, which we have to distribute then and do research and do programs at schools and stuff like that. And it would be nice. You would have, for 2 years, you would have a fixed income without having to worry about acquiring new customers and doing sales calls and stuff like that. And I could quietly do my empathy work and only have to work 1 or 2 days a week, which would be nice.
Oh, wow. So you would be like, you'd be coordinating other people doing the project, so kind of like subcontracting?
Yeah, well, more something like that, yeah. I'm not really sure what I will do because we have just started and we have to define our roles. And my main role now is to draft a concept and for the grant, so that I will do most of the work before. So I have 1 month to draft a concept, and then I will get paid afterwards. Or if you don't get the grant, it was all for nothing.
Do you think there's any grants for empathy, direct empathy work?
Well, I haven't seen any yet. No. But I will be doing empathy circles in June. I here once a month in Berlin.
Who do you do that with, or what's?
Well, I would just do it on my own. You know,
Right.
with the guys from I will do it under the label Academy for Empathy, which we have here in Berlin, which doesn't really do so much about empathy. So I thought, okay, now we actually have to do something about empathy, not just calling ourselves like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to start offering well, courses on, I called it empathy for practitioners. Having an empathy workshop for people who are actually practicing empathy on a daily basis, whoever that may be, and we all come together. We do an empathy circle, and people share their different experiences. You know, get fresh empathy if they have if they feel depleted, if they give too much empathy, get empathy back, and you know, discuss strategies how to deal and with that and stuff like that.
Well, that's good.
That's
So
one
empathy
program.
for the empathizers. So
Yeah,
also a
definitely. Yeah,
support group for people who are supporting others.
yeah. Because I think there's a great need for that, and I mean there has been. I mean Helen, how's she called? Helen Keller? No,
Reese?
Helen Hunt.
Go ahead.
Helen Reese. Yeah, I mean she's doing something like that as well, and I did
For
read
doctors.
some papers on that. Yeah, for care empathy for caregivers. You know, that the people who have to be empathic on a daily basis, some get some support back, and
I had talked. I have this meeting scheduled on Thursday with her CEO. You know, she started the empathy company.
yeah.
So I'm talking with them. I had a talk with her, Tess. They have 6 people in their company, and they got $1.5 million venture capital money for their
Wow.
training.
Yeah.
And so we're going to talk and see if there's some collaboration possibilities. And so I told them about this group and about the conference, and their interest in doing a conference. They've been talking about it maybe in 2 years, so wanted to talk about that, as well as they also like the idea of a trainers association, because they're starting to do trainers. And so that's one of the projects I want to do is can we create an international trainers association? Like I thought it could be Global Empathy Trainers Association, so it'd be GETA, GETA.
GETA. What means GETA? Is there?
Doesn't mean anything. No, there's GET, but or it could just be ATA. No, ETA, Empathy Trainers Association. So anyway, that's another project on the.
Now, ETA is the name of a terror organization in Europe.
ETA, ETA.
ETA, yes, is the the Spanish, the Basques. I don't know if you heard of them. Part of Spain wants to separate from the rest of Spain, and the ETA is a terror organization which has been operating for 30 years now, and they really have vicious. People always say it's the Muslims who are bombing, but they have forgotten that the IRA was doing a lot of bombing, and the ETA was doing a lot of bombing. And these were just white guys without any religious motive. Oh, I mean, IRA had religious motives, but ETA didn't have religious motives. They were just saying, we want our own state. And anyway, this is a sideline, but
no. So let's be careful about ETA being it wouldn't go over well in Europe, because everybody think it's we're a terrorist organization, so maybe GETA would be better.
GETA.
Global.
But GETA, yeah, thinking of an acronym is very important.
Well, if you
something
think
that care would be nice,
Yeah.
Care,
something. We have C-Care, from Stanford.
C-Care, okay.
But that's from Stanford Group, Compassion, Altruism, Research, and Education. So.
Oh, what is it? How do they call it at Berkeley? At Berkeley, they also have the Greater Good, right?
Yeah, Greater Good Science Center.
Yeah, yeah. Have you cooperated with them as well?
I've chatted with them and talked with them. We haven't had, they used to give me free tickets to their events because I would publicize them, but they haven't done much with empathy. They did a little, but not much. They seem to be really focused around the compassion and gratitude and community. So I haven't had that much recently.
I mean, it feels really a shame. I think there needs to be some synthesis, because I mean, I find it so when I read the article from Jennifer Götz, for example, she really uses for her research on compassion. She uses so many journals that speak of empathic concern. So empathic concern and compassion is really synonymous.
Mm-hmm.
And you can, if you people who are trying to see them as two different concepts, I think that is really just the need to press something in this Buddhist category. And the Buddhists didn't. I mean, this is just thinking. You take a Sanskrit word, karuna, or the Pali word metta, and you take the Sanskrit word karuna, you translate it into compassion, and then you make a big fuss that compassion is something different from empathy, which again is not a real word. I mean, empathy is just it's not a real word even. It's a made-up word by this English guy who was reading the German guy's article about Einfühlung, and it seems really odd, and everybody is talking about the same concept, about empathic concern or sympathy or compassion. You see somebody else suffering and you feel the suffering in you and you want to alleviate, you want to make that person feel better. So this really seems very odd to have a fight, whether it's called empathic concern or compassion.
Well, there are subtle things, like in the empathy community, they do distinguish between sympathy and empathy, and they do have real effects. Like there is a real visceral effect. So if I empathize with you, you can feel it, the empathy, the being present with you, versus if I start feeling sorry for you, having sympathy. There's actually a visceral difference, and people kind of react kind of negatively. Well, they can react negatively to that sympathy, just as so it's like, I think it's trying to, there's an experience.
But haven't we got the situation then that when you talk about sympathy like that, actually somebody else would call it pity?
Well, they do just differentiate sympathy, pity, and as different words. So they all kind of get melded together, and
they are, but pity really is more like I do pity you. Oh, you poor little schmuck! What is happening to you?
There's a looking down. There's a kind of a looking down quality to it. But the sympathy is, with the sympathy, it's a shift of focus, right? So if I empathize with you, I kind of keep my focus on you with your experience.
Mm-hmm.
If I start sympathizing with you, there's like this shift of focus to my sense of feeling sorry for you. So there's an energetic shift between the two.
Okay, so, but then I like the distinction between empathy and empathic concern. This one I really like, because I mean, feeling your feelings is one thing, but then actually getting into a mode of helping the other person, of showing concern and acting on that, I think that is also a very important point. That showing empathy is one thing, but then actually getting into doing, get to the point where you are motivated to do something. And what we are talking about, then reflecting somebody else's feelings and giving him empathy, that is also a mode of acting. Because by doing so, you're doing some psychological way of helping that person, which is also acting. Just standing there and not saying anything. You know, I see you suffering or unhappy, and I just register it by empathy. I mean, that's also empathy. I register your feeling unhappy, and I'm not acting on that. I'm not saying, well, Edwin, I notice I notice that you feel sad. Um, that is acting already, because I'm speaking to you. I'm acting. I'm behaving towards you, and just so I'm showing empathic concern for you as a person. But just or compassion, however you want to define it. If I just stand here and look at you, then I think that's just empathy without anything else. I know that you're suffering, and I'm not going to do anything about it, not even talk about it.
Yeah. There's a, yeah, it's putting it all into context is good, right? Like, what is real actual situations, and to look at it within a context. So, you know, I think there's one part of the empathy is like, I guess I see one part, we have all these different terms coming up, but that empathy is an integrative process, that we can, you can kind of stop the integration, right? It's like I'm maybe suffering or something's going on with me. You are present, you're looking at me, what's happening. There's a level of integration, but it seems to be sort of frozen and stopped. Like a next level of integration would be, you know, maybe you reflecting something or saying something, and then we can have a continuous kind of integration, and then there's kind of that action, like what is the action we take if there is a need for action.
But getting into that kind of interaction on sharing, reflecting, that is also an action. You know,
that's an action too, yeah.
Communication is always an action.
Yeah, I see a lot of people talk about empathy. It's like it's neutral. I see it as a really a highly active state. You know, it's a very highly active, and it's very supportive. So somebody can you can just be there with them, and just by being heard, by being able to share what's going on with them. Like I even have that when I'm kind of depressed. I go, just let me share it, and I'm kind of like sharing, and I start coming to like a new hope, and I have a new energy that I leave with. So I have my own energy that I have from that. I mean, that happens to me sometimes. I'm feeling depressed, like what I'm doing is crazy. I send out an email to my friends, oh, I need empathy, I need some, and I'll just speak for like 45 minutes or an hour.
But then at the same time, you know, we don't have to forget that sometimes you have to be a little more hands-on. You know, for example, if you see an old lady coming out of a grocery store and she's carrying 2 heavy bags, and you go up to her and say, well, you look distressed, these bags might be heavy. And then, you know, you show a lot of empathy. But if you just walk away and let that poor old lady, you know, go on carrying the bags, then actually that's then, you know, the psychological empathy was maybe not enough, you know. So then you have to use the empathic sensing of her distress as a trigger to go into a more hands-on action of actually grabbing her bags and carrying it to her car, or carrying the bags to her home, and taking that 5 minutes to actually do something more.
Yeah, there's another quality that I see is within the empathy circle. We're doing empathic listening with each other, and you know, we have this listening, and I find that supportive. But I also do the restorative empathy circle. So my sister-in-law just emailed me and said she's having some conflict with my brother-in-law. So she asked for an empathy circle.
You're talking about that, yeah.
And so just yesterday, I did empathic listening for half an hour with her.
Yeah.
And tomorrow I will go visit my family. My brother-in-law and sister live on the farm with my parents. So I'm going to go talk with them and do a pre-circle with them. And then we'll schedule a time. We're going to bring everyone together, and we do an empathy circle like we're doing, mutual empathic listening like we do in our group.
And then part of the group is, what do we do now? Everybody understands each other. They've worked through the problem.
Mhm.
There's more sense of peace, you know, there's more sense of understanding. And then there's the question of, what do we do now? And there's this empathic dialogue that happens, like, well, I suggest we get together once a week for sharing. So and the other person says, oh, I can't meet every week, but I could meet every 2 weeks. And the other person says, oh, I can do every 2 weeks. How about 8 o'clock in the morning? Oh, that's too early for me. How about we do 9 o'clock? Then I'm more awake. Okay, I can do that. So there's this integration of the action, right? We're coming together. And I see that what we're doing with the human-centered design is almost like a highly sophisticated action tool set, right? It's like we're using the human-centered design is all about how do you do action in an effective way and come up with creative new ideas and implement them. So I see that's just one kind of context, and so I'm totally there with the action component and having tools for fostering, supporting that action. How do we? And then there's even like the homeless person, being empathic for the homeless person. I mean, I feel like I'm now working at actually addressing that by doing this empathy circle work, because if we can teach the people how to be more empathic, have a training for a homeless person so that we can even head people off from becoming homeless. Because one of the things of homelessness is this sense of disconnection, losing social connection. If we can be training people to be more empathic, to work through their problems, to maybe have less, need for addiction or whatever, have less, have tools for resolving personal conflicts, that we're even heading off the person getting to that point. And if they're in that point, can we create empathic environments where they can be heard, where they don't feel isolated, that there's a tool set that they can learn some skills of empathic listening, have a supportive group, and actually start learning how to design solutions to their own problems going forward too. So I think what we're doing with the empathy training is like, that's the core of what, I see how it fits in the whole field of, we can train people for this. So it's really important to me what we're doing.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I also feel that I mean, the empathic way of being is also a way to actually open people up to actually the beauty of living together, of the beauty of being socially integrated, and of living together, and of getting away with these over-individualistic society nowadays that we live in, where people, you have the technological disconnect, you have the economic disconnect, and people think about technology, people think about money, and they really seek all the heil. What is the English word for heil?
The healing, the kind of
all the healing, yes. All they see all the goodness. Yeah. Heil is that's a very good German word. Of course, if you see it in Nazi context, salvation, right? Yeah. They seek their salvation in money or technology, or but the human being will not be saved by money or technology. Like, have you ever read Bertolt Brecht?
No.
He was a very, have you heard of Bertolt Brecht?
I've definitely heard of him. I've seen like documentaries in Germany about him and stuff.
Yeah. So I mean, one of his key phrases are the human being can only be saved by a human being. So it cannot be saved by capitalism. It cannot be saved by religion. It can only be saved by another human being. And well, of course, I'm not an atheist like Bertolt Brecht. I too think that God can save us, but he I think personally he chooses to do that by empowering human beings to,
Mm-hmm.
to not be greedy and to not be, follow the base desires and to be powerful. Like this Donald Trump really, I read, I really got into the Indian mystical literature, and Donald Trump really seems to be like an archetypical demon, like somebody, and the Indian literature defines demons not like spooky persons, but defines demons as persons who want to who want to be God themselves in a way. Like he's some like a person from a fairy tale from Christian Andersen, this Danish fairy tale writer, who wants to be God himself and amasses all this power and self-aggrandizement, and he is like the opposite of somebody who envisions an empathic society in a way.
Yeah.
Because in an empathic society, I think that also has a little to do with a just allocation of means and of means of production and means of income. In an empathic society, it cannot be that 1% is having 90% of all the money, and you have the rest of the 10% are really hardworking in 2 or 3 jobs, or not that much working as in Silicon Valley, but I mean, there's so many people toiling away in this world, and in an empathic society, there should be enough. I mean, there is enough money for everybody in this whole world. I mean, there's so much food, there's so much money, and it's you can really define it as a lack of empathy, that money and food is not distributed in such a way that I mean, not everybody needs to have a Hummer or a Cadillac Escalade or something like that, but everybody should have a decent meal, 3 decent warm meals a day, and a roof over his head, and live in peace and have a good job. Only working 8 hours a day, 5 hours a week, I think that is a decent life for everybody, and having a good school and the possibility to have children if people want to, and raise them in peace. And I think people don't really want to have that much, right? And,
well,
and still
when you started, you say the beauty of empathy, I think it was, or the beauty of relationships too. So I thought, oh, that's a good way to present the training, a motivation, right? Because to feel the beauty that comes out of the relationships, so versus kind of the more individualistic, self-centered kind of feeling disconnected.
And the self-centered and the and have you read Martin Buber, the Jewish philosopher?
Yeah.
He is very much into this dialogue thing, that only in the dialogue between me and you there is actually a truth. There cannot be some individual truth. Truth is only there if people come into dialogue. Only then do people are truly alive. So and nowadays people they don't seek fulfillment in relationships. They seek fulfillment in things, in material things. And materialism really is also a block to empathy. If you are an overly materialistic person and only find joy in things, in dead things, then you don't train your empathy. Empathy withers, and you are like you isolate yourself, you disconnect yourself, right?
Yeah, well, I really base, I quote Buber and see that as kind of the lineage, kind of the empathy lineage, right? That it's, I guess that's one of my concerns about the mindfulness community. I mean, I kind of see that sometimes it's like I come to connection through disconnecting myself and going into myself, where I see the idea is you kind of come to this deep realization of the connectedness of everybody. But with Buber, it's like we're through the relationship, Like the more we can relate, we learn to relate by relating, basically, by, so that's kind of where I see the empathy, that the empathy is like a tool for how do we relate and how do we relate more deeply. Here you and I are here, and we're relating. How do we relate more deeply with each other? What is it that we can do to have a deeper sense of connection and a deeper quality of relating? And just that one skill of empathic listening is already just one tool for getting a little bit deeper into the relating. There's other things like that, other things like the focusing tool of speaking from a felt experience in the moment, felt experience. I don't know if you've done the focusing process.
No, I haven't.
But you might want to look into that. It's focusing.org. And that's it comes from Gene Genlin, who is a grad student and became a colleague of Carl Rogers.
Oh, right, I heard, yeah. Andrea Cohn was studying about that, right? Wasn't she?
Different people. I don't know if Andrea was. Oh, Andrea. Well, Rosa has experience with focusing. There's a lot of people have had, little varied degrees of. Yeah, I think Andrea had some focusing. So that's something we can try. I would like to actually bring in. I see that as one of the tools we can bring into the training. For the longer training, is that's like we have the dialogue we have is about what is in the moment, the felt experience that we have in the moment. Like I can say, oh, I'm feeling a little bit of a headache up here. I'm feeling kind of like a sense of spaciousness, here. So you start looking at what the felt experience is in the moment. And then you add the reflective listening from another person. Like you can reflect back, and that actually allows me to go more deeply. And that was his insight, Genlin's insight, was looking at all the patients who the therapists were working with, that the ones that had the most growth coming out of depression, coming out of alienation, whatever it was, they were the ones that were speaking most from their felt experience.
Okay.
So that's something you can do is, in the relationship, speak more. I mean, the idea there, you speak more from the moment to moment felt experience, as well as have that. So those are another tool. There's the other tools of internal family relationships, where we can start playing with what are our own internal dilemmas that we're having, and then do role playing with those, So there's a whole tool set.
This transactional, have you heard of this transactional coaching? The transactional school, they do a lot with these inner critique and inner voices and your child ego, your parent ego, your actual ego, and this and that. I looked into that, and I found also this very interesting. They do a lot of research about the values that you got from your parents and your own values and the conflicts that you have that or your parents' trait empathy might have been very bad, so they told you don't, just be strong, don't be sentimental, and stuff like that. And yeah,
the part where you can take a felt experience and you can create an archetype for it. That's kind of one thing. But the part that I like to do is that if there's any internal parts that are dialoguing, have them dialogue with empathic listening. I think that's something, you know what I mean? That the parts, they start empathizing with each other. So you start building a strengthening of internal relational empathy within yourself.
Okay.
Just as you and I are in conflict or whatever, that we can use empathic listening to start working out the problems. Can we take our own...
Isn't that going a bit into psycho schizophrenic direction, that you really give the voices too much strength?
In fact, I'd be really curious if we could train schizophrenics, that the judgments in schizophrenics is often very judgmental, that the different parts in a schizophrenic could actually start empathizing with each other as a way to integrate them. Because just as you and I could be in conflict and be listening and have an integration, that we could integrate our own internal conflicts. And that's the story I was mentioning about the person that had the creativity, the judgment, and then the pain, and then just, I don't want anything to do with it. But by spending 45 minutes talking about these, she integrated them, and it was like, at the end, she was like so happy, and it was just us doing role play because we had harmonized. She saw the humanity of her judgment. She saw the humanity of her creativity, and she was able to integrate these two conflicting internal qualities and kind of create some harmony with it. And
I believe that, yeah. I mean, I tried the self-compassion exercises by Kirsten Neff, and at first I thought them a bit silly, but then I really tried them, and I was really surprised how, being kind to yourself and treating yourself with empathy and compassion really did me good. I wouldn't have expected it, but I really felt very good afterwards, and also her. I mean, she combines self-empathy and this loving kindness meditation, and it felt really good thinking about a person that has truly been good to me, and then getting into that mindset, wishing that person who has been truly good all the best. May you be safe, may you be peaceful, may you be healthy, may you live at ease, and then wishing, concentrating that feelings and then wishing it on yourself as well. It felt really good. I was really surprised doing that. I'm also a skeptical person, very much so. That is some inner voice I inherited from my father, to be antagonistic and skeptical.
Okay.
But experiencing that for myself always kills the skepticism, and it felt really good.
Well, there you go. It sounds like you have two parts. You have the skepticism, and what's the other part? Is like, go ahead and experience it.
The experiencing the daredevil, the believer. That's the other part.
Okay, so that could be like a role play, right? I mean, this is like, we can bring this stuff into our training, where somebody becomes the skeptical, and the other becomes the role playing. I mean, becomes the daredevil, and then, but I think the point is that they reflect each other. They don't battle it out. They don't just fight it out, which a lot of the role playing does. Is that the role playing actually empathizes with each other. So that could be like an exercise that I would love to share some of my dilemmas, whatever comes up, and then have a space to kind of do an empathic role play between those two.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, and that's I mean, many people nowadays have many dilemmas nowadays, and Goethe's Faust is about a dilemma which was 200 years ago. So I think people all the time had dilemmas. It's not a new invention.
They have their own internal dilemmas that they're dealing with.
Yeah. And to kill the internal dilemmas might also not be a good idea, because it does create having two sides to oneself does create a creative tension. And it's with a muscle. You can only jump far if your muscles, if you have some tension. If you, of course, if you are blocked, if you are, if your muscles are tense, of course you cannot jump, but very far. But if you are, agile and in a relaxed way, then you can really deliver some distance when you do long jump. In the same way, if you just kill your side, your judgmental side, I don't think that's that might also not be a very good idea, because then you become complacent and you become some of these persons who have a blown out of proportion self-esteem. But when you can balance out your judgmental side with your self kindness side, and you strike a nice balance, then actually you still have the two sides to be creative, to get good balanced thoughts without suffering, without
Hmm.
being lopsided.
So you see that opposing kind of concepts or cell pieces can actually create a creative balance. So it creates
I mean, sure. I mean, people who are only one thing, they of course, for one hand, they're a little boring, and on the other hand, they don't usually create anything. And of course, I do envy them a lot of times because they may be a lot happier than I am. On the other hand, I think if you really want to, it's with these dialectic thinking. You know, you always, in order to achieve a higher truth, you need two sides of the story, and then just keep thinking until you reach the synthesis, which is wisdom in a way. I mean, a wise person can actually integrate two opposing truths, and only with this expanding your mind, you can only do this if you have had the two
mhm.
opposing things in the first place. You know.
Yeah.
Uh,
So yeah, I'm there. That's where I am too. But the part I'm looking at is see those two opposing uh, forces.
hmm.
How do we do the integration? Not like a debate, you're right? There's this debate where they kind of battle it out, but that they actually empathize with it. Because in looking for what is the creative core, you know, we need some kind of a creative, energetic core to move this all forward. And that creative core, I think, can come from the dialogue, the empathic dialogue between the different
Hmm.
parts. They might be angry, might be pissed off with each other, but they're always willing to listen and reflect back and empathize with the other side, which, you know,
Hmm.
creates an energy of the dialogue between them. So there's that energy, but there is a deeper and deeper integration between the two because they keep getting, you know, at least that's my experience of the dialogue between conflict is it always gets deeper and
Hmm.
deeper till some kind of a core is reached, like some kind of a common core humanity is kind of reached. But then there's always another problem arises, and then we're able to work through with the next one. So it's never ending, but having that tool of being able to empathize.
Well, I think the self core could be your, like an inherent self love you feel for the different parts of your personality. And I think if you do not have that core appreciation of yourself, I'm okay the way I am. If you do not have that core feeling, then you might be in trouble, and you should better consult a psychotherapy to actually get that feeling to heal. And find yourself a nice, empathetic psychotherapist who knows how to deal with your traumas. And but this core feeling, I might have an inner conflict. I might have different parts of myself that might not be in harmony. If you do have that appreciation, I'm okay. In the end, I'm a good person. I think that could be one of the cores, you know, to have that feeling that you get. You probably get it from your parents. I mean, if you have received a certain amount of love during while growing up, maybe not necessarily from your parents, but from some caretaker, has shown you enough love that you have that feeling, I'm a lovable person. That might be one of the cores that you actually need to
Mhm.
go through this inner dialogue, and have a constructive inner dialogue, and not a
Mhm.
destructive dialogue.
Okay,
When you
so
find somebody,
what I'm hearing
yeah,
there,
please.
what I'm hearing there is that it's good if you have, like, you have these dialogues that you can
Hmm.
negotiate or mediate, but to have another part of self that's like a self that is like a loving self, a love of self, and
Hmm.
that creates a space that all this dialogue can happen with. And you're saying that it's like having caretakers, you know, parents or, you know, people who cared about you, that kind of offer that to you, that then you're able to develop that and hold that, and that will create a more healthy way of kind of navigating those conflicts, so that those conflicts don't become negative in the end and kind of take over with the negativity. Like, is that kind of...
Yeah, I mean, I would love to hear Gertie's viewpoint on that. She probably has would have to say a lot about that from a psychotherapist point of view. But from what I feel, that I would think that, I mean, I would it would make sense in a way, you know, that the dialogue becomes destructive if you do not have that loving core, which somebody is a loving seed, which somebody planted in you a long time ago. And
yeah, the way that so the way that I would look at it is, I'm looking at empathy as kind of the space for it to happen within. So it kind of is the so it's like there's the conflicting internal parts can be taught to empathize with each other. They can learn to have an empathic dialogue. That to support that way of being, you can have other people who are willing to hear your own feelings, and that they will empathize with you, and that kind of gives support for that empathic way of being. So that, you know, like with Gertie, you know, I could be in a distressed or whatever, and she would listen, you know, empathically listening. I mean, that's the whole Carl Rogers listening. That's kind of the healing. It's like, whatever's going on for me, that there's this outside support, and it's kind of like your parents, right? They were there, and I think you had even mentioned that you didn't have the support that you felt you really needed because you were taking care of, was it your mother who was sick?
my mother, yeah.
So you weren't getting the support you needed because you were, and you're kind of losing a sense of self because you're just not being heard, and you were having to put all your energy into supporting her. So it sounds like you didn't have the empathy of the outside support for, you know, you're saying, oh, I feel like nobody's listening to me. I'm feeling alone, or I'm feeling stressed. And there was nobody to listen and hear that and kind of help you kind of be heard and to integrate that and feel that there were other people who cared about you and have that integrative process. And
yeah,
so,
totally.
Yeah. So it's creating that multi-dimensional field of empathy where all these different feelings can be willing to listen to each other and integrate with each other, and is kind of what I see as our training. Basically, how do we train people in that? And the easiest first step I found is to start learning how to do reflective listening, right? We can have reflective listening with each other. We can start having mutual reflective listening where the group reflects each other, and then we can even go into our own internal issues where they start reflecting each other, and people can help us with role play. Like I was mentioning with Alice, that was that creativity, that people will actually support us in role playing parts of ourselves, so we can kind of help work those out. Or so it's creating this multi-dimensional empathic listening kind of field that everything kind of gets ongoing, worked through, and integrated, and you know, really contributes to, just for me, kind of being heard contributes to my well-being, creates a more openness, a more spaciousness, and kind of field all around me. And I think that can just actually help the whole world to have that empathic field if people can be learning some of these simple skills and ways of being.
Yeah, that sounds sensible.
Yeah.
Of course, also, I mean, I think it's a process that goes hand in hand. That you learn to be empathic with other persons, and the same time you learn how to be empathic with yourself. I think that goes hand in hand. You know, I would say only doing self-empathy, only doing a self-empathy course, I think would not be enough, because empathy in a way is always directed at other persons as well. And it's talking about self-empathy in a way, the scientific skeptical side of me would say, well, there's nothing like self-empathy. You can have self-compassion, you can have concern, you can have self-awareness, you can have self-kindness, but empathy by definition is only happening when you experience the feelings of other persons. But then again, talking about self-empathy makes it actually a little easier, maybe, because the same rules apply if you deal with your own feelings than when you deal with other person's feelings. So maybe talking about self-empathy also has its truth.
Yeah, I like
in
the
the
term
end,
self-empathy. It's like
you do.
there's different qualities around that I'm seeing. As one is, remember that story I told about? It was Jeff, who I was listening to, the young guy, and I was empathizing with him, which was allowing him to go deeper and deeper into his experience. And he was saying, I've never felt so creative in my life because I was listening.
Sure.
And the thought, so for him, it was me empathizing with him, but at the moment he was doing self-empathy. He was empathizing with his own felt experience, going deeper and deeper. So my empathizing with him created a support for him to empathize more deeply. So one of the greatest tools for self-empathy is to empathize with someone else.
I mean, I totally agree about the process. It's just naming it could be a little difficult in the scientific community. That's the only thing I'm saying, that that when around scientifically minded academic persons, then talking about self-empathy could be a little problematic, because actually what we're talking about is self-awareness of our own emotions, being self-aware, or what David Goleman, he calls it emotional intelligence, being intelligent about your own, being cognizant about your own emotions. I mean, that's a great strength that not so many people can do. And we have a great emotional memory where we store all the things that have happened to us emotionally, all our experiences, and we are not able to tap it all the time. We need to get in a special mindset to actually tap on emotional situations, and a good psychotherapist, he or she can do that to bring you with empathic listening into a state where you start to remember things and feelings that you have not been aware before.
So you're saying that, so what I'm hearing there is there's two parts. One is a good psychotherapist supports you in that self-empathy going into yourself, but that the term self-empathy might not be accepted in academia because they're thinking empathy is only for another person and not for oneself. So.
Well, when you take, a lot of people have defined empathy in the academic community, and then when you take even the most, I think it was Hoffman or Batson, or I have to look it up. I've written all the. I also have written all down a lot of these empathy definitions, and
you should put them onto the page, onto the.
Yeah, I will do so.
You should integrate them. I'd love to see them.
I will do that. I mean, they're not that different from the ones you have written down, of course not. But,
if there is more,
I think one of the most common denominators is that empathy is always defined as vicariously experiencing another person's emotion. I really have forgotten who said that, but it was a very important person. So it has to be for them. To speak about empathy, it has to be the emotion of another person you're experiencing. Otherwise, they would not call it empathy.
I actually mentioned self-empathy. I actually mentioned self-empathy to Dan Batson. He didn't like the term. I actually talked to him several times, and I didn't mention it. So I got it directly from him. So I know exactly what you're talking about. But I think we can define it. We can create that definition. And, Carl Rogers mentioned self-empathy, as well as Marshall Rosenberg have mentioned self-empathy. So
sure. I mean, they were not scientists; they were psychotherapists. So
but Carl Rogers was known for being merging the two, the practitioner and the scientific. He took pride. He actually said, "The contribution I have is bringing the two together," because he was trying to hold the two. So he actually did a lot of, quoting scientific studies. He was always there trying to merge the two. So. I think the self-empathy can be a piece of it. The other part of self-empathy is there's the self-empathy that comes from me empathizing with you and you able to go deeper into your own experience. And another self-empathy would be what I'm seeing out of the NBC, what they're offering is there's three versions of it. There's the feeling into you and allowing you to go into your own experience. There's the Gene Genlin approach, is speaking about your own moment-to-moment felt experience. So you can do more self-empathy. You can get better at self-empathy by speaking about how do you feel now in the moment and having that reflected back to you. You can feel your visceral experience. And then another way of doing it is the NBC approach, is to translate a feeling into the need, the underlying feeling. Like, what feeling is needed by this feeling that I have now? Like, if I'm feeling anxious, I feel anxious because I have, they would say, an unmet need for safety. Right? So you do this, they have this whole process of needs translations, which is another tool that allows you to go more deeply inside yourself. So that would be another form of self, and that's what they actually call self-empathy, is looking at your own feelings and tapping into the deeper feelings and then translating them into the deeper needs. So those are at least three methods for, I see. And then we could even do self-empathy as the role-playing, internal role-playing of your internal parts would be going more deeply into your internal parts. So that would be even another method for, and each of these could be a lesson in our training, right? It's like, here's how you do self-empathy. First, you learn how to be heard, and you go into yourself, have some stories about that. You can do tap into your felt experience, and here's how you learn how to tap into your felt experience. Here's how you, the third one, this is how you take a feeling and translate it into a need or, a felt value that you have underneath. So anyway, I'm kind of brainstorming here for how we can actually translate this into our training too.
Yeah. I mean, there's just one thing which is has been on my mind that is also pertaining to the training, but at the same time on the book I want to write and on my dissertation. So basically, how to actually coin empathy in a way that it really becomes attractive to persons. If we market it as an empathy training, I mean, we understand how important empathy is. And I mean, my own history of treating empathy, I mean, I has been going for a long time. I mean, I have been with an Indian ashram for a long time, where karuna, the Sanskrit word karuna, was really an important virtue of behaving in an empathic way to every living entity. Was really important. So I can see that. But how to actually coin it in such a way that people really want to have that? And I mean, I liked it when we had our human-centered design thing, the moment where how to phrase it that people actually, just concentrating on the love making just will not do it for me, at least. I think it's a nice idea, but I want to sell that to the business community. And actually, I think showing the business that empathy is very important, and not just for customer support. That's what Google is doing. They are teaching their employees empathy training to actually deliver better customer support. But just showing that an empathic acting and extraordinary empathy is good for is good for business. Is for the human beings who are in the business world, and
So you want to
I
make the
feel
case.
that also.
Okay, let me just reflect here. So I'm hearing is you really want to make you've been working with empathy for a long time, and you're kind of sold on the benefits of it and that we talked about. It kind of came up in our lessons too, like our design, and we came up with love making as one. But you're saying that we'll sell it, but sex sells, so love making, passion sells. But you're really wanting to address it for the business community, and what can you do to bring it as a benefit into the business community? And you're seeing some, that just doing it for customer support or something is not enough. You need something more to really sell it. And you're just sitting with the question of how can I sell this or get companies to want this.
Companies and also yes, companies and more people,
or businesses in the business world.
Yeah.
And what have you come up with?
The general public. Well, I've got squat till now. Not that much, I mean, there are already some books out there about empathy and business and stuff like that, or empathy as a whole. But I think it's not really just an issue for business trainings. It's also an issue for online training, how to actually attract people to book that course, that they actually get in order to create a culture of empathy, or to promote an empathetic culture. I think it might be necessary to actually sugarcoat the medicine a little more. But now the question is how to sugarcoat it without actually doing injustice to the content, to the peanut inside, like with an M&M. I mean, a few people actually eat peanuts who are not roasted and who are not salted and who don't have a chocolate coating,
But isn't that what we came up with? In our design group, we came up with is a little bit of noise with the truck passing, is that it's the things that people feel strongly. It's like strong feelings and kind of the passion, and we're trying to tap into finding those strong feelings of passion. It's like, what will people get really excited about, and what will they resonate with? And
but we still call it, I know that we're on the right track, but I feel we're still not there.
We don't have the core. What is it?
No, the core might be there. The core is a peanut, which is incredibly high in protein and incredibly high in healthy fat, and which keeps you alive, healthy, and gives you a long life and makes you happy. But I feel that for most people, we need more some sugar coating around that. We need because when people read empathy, they only those people will become attracted that are high in trait empathy anyway.
But I can see that one demand that I'm seeing is the human-centered design. So the human-centered design as a process is becoming very popular. There's a lot of money, a lot of support. The SAP, the CEO of SAP, gave $130 million to David Kelly to start the D School at Stanford. So it's really SAP's money that's really supporting this. And so SAP is trying to transform into a design organization. So they've been grabbing people out of the design school. And they actually started a design school, a D school at Potsdam. So you're actually near there. You could probably go over and try, connecting with those folks.
I mean, I was thinking of doing more than because actually the academy. I mean, this is just between the two of us, but the few of us with the Academy for Empathy, they're not really heading anywhere. It's not it's not going in the direction that I would have wanted. But
Yeah, I hope they don't have the skills and so forth that's needed,
no,
perhaps.
not the skills, not so much the understanding, or
Mhm.
I mean, the heart is in the right spot, but and we are all too much immersed in our desire to. I mean, all of us, we all have to do so much to earn money, which is
Mhm.
not that much connected with empathy,
Right.
and that's part of the issue that everybody would like to do more with empathy, but then there's the other job, and as long as you're not given $1 million and don't have to worry about money anymore, and you can earn your money by delivering empathy trainings,
That's what we need to do, is we need to get this going to where we can create the money by delivering trainings, and then it can keep growing and expanding with that training engine is kind of what I'm looking at. So I think that's again why the training part's so critical for me.
It is, and what you say is really inspiring, because SAP, I mean, it's a German company after all, and they give so much money for good things as well. I mean, this one SAP guy, actually, he financed the whole part of the University of Potsdam. It is his school. It's not just a design school. It's
Oh,
he
really?
financed the
Uh-huh.
yeah. He
Well,
bought the
maybe that
whole
would be a contact, is to make some contact with them, because they have a real interest in empathy, because they're very explicit that empathy is the gateway to the whole design process. So
it is, but then we have the issue, you know, which we also discussed, that people, you know, when they are in this human, you know, the few people actually think they are low on empathy. You know, few people think, you know, what I found also in the interviews, it's always the other person that is lacking empathy, and that seems to be really a something that many people share. You ask anybody, and they will tell you, "Well, I'm empathic. The other person is not." And you ask the other person, "Well, he's not empathic, but I am." And so that is
yeah,
the
we had
thing
that
that
experience. Uh-huh.
yeah, isn't
Yeah.
it? So that this is a twist where I'm thinking. So we are trying to attract people to our training because we truly believe that empathy is going to make the world a better place. The issue is that the people who need it most won't come because they think they have it. And now, if if we can find, you know, another wording for that to attract people coming to the workshop, regardless whether they have to think I've got empathy, yes or not, I think that would make all the difference. And it's basically a marketing issue. But as we
Actually, it could be something just like a movie about empathy, you know, something that markets it and gets it out there, that generates this demand. I'm going to have to go in a minute, but I think this is a design, it's a design challenge for us, because it's really, if we set it, how might we inspire, motivate, or whatever people to want empathy, you know, training. I mean, that is one of our design challenges, and it's just something we're going to have to keep working on. And we can actually use the design process to keep getting into the depths of. In fact, I had shown you those empathy maps, you know, and I think those are a way to kind of uncover those latent feelings in people, that we can find the vocabulary that speaks. The whole thing is our design, if we, you know, the human-centered design is holding the needs of the people in hand. So thinking of the people we interviewed, how is our work going to motivate them? Like my partner, Joan, you know, what is it that I can say to inspire her to want to do training? What can this training do to the person? Who is it that you interviewed? Gazelle, or was that Giselle or something?
Giselle.
Giselle. What is it that will inspire Giselle? You know, what can we do to create to make her say, yes, I want this training? You know, because that's kind of holding the needs of the people that we're interviewing. And that's what those empathy maps do, is they create a model of the person that when we create, we keep creating. Is this working for her or not? You know, is this going to do it? Nope, that's not going to work. let's try this, you know, and then go back to her and try to sell her on it and see if we can find.
And actually, that makes that makes two design challenges that we have. On the one hand, we have to design the training, and on the other hand, we have to design a marketing strategy, how to sell the training, which of course both processes are interconnected, because by doing market research and finding out how people will be receptible for empathy, and by finding out what vocabulary will sell people on empathy trainings, we actually do find out a lot about how to design the training, because
That's true.
and both things, and when we have designed the training, then of course I don't think we want to be persons who sell apples and call them oranges.
Right.
That would also be deceitful. So the product we are going to sell should also be reflected in the name, but in the way that people get what they pay for, but even get more than what they pay for,
Yeah.
because the consumer is by nature a little stupid. So
Yeah, well, maybe we need some people that are really good at marketing. I wonder if there's any marketing group that would say, yeah, we really want to see what it's like to sell empathy. Do you know what I mean? If there's people who have who are really good at marketing, just good marketers, I wonder if they would take on the challenge of, yeah, let's try this out. We're selling soda pop, we're selling cars, we're selling all this crap. Let's try to sell empathy. What would that be like? Is kind of like a challenge, you know?
You know, I'm getting a good idea. You know, we could first design the training, and then we pitch to a marketing company and telling them, you know what, we can train you how to be empathic, because for you it's very important. It's part of the human design process, and it will help you understand your customers, and we do that for free, and you in turn help us.
I love that. That's a great idea.
Design a marketing campaign.
That would be great. Yeah, it would give them motivation for wanting to do it. It would be like a win-win, you know, mutually beneficial. So let's do that. That's good. We'll share that with Gertie. I like that. That's the kind of way my mind thinks too, is how can we create these energies that actually work? Yeah. And then look for some design, not design, but marketing companies. I'll look around for marketing people too. I'll keep that in my mind too. So, but I better go. That was a great. I'm glad we ended with that insight, because I think that has real potential. That has practical potential. You know.
Yeah, isn't it? I think we should. I'm sketching it down, and then you know. I don't have to do it now. I will just sketch it down so I don't lose the thought.
Okay.
But it's yeah.
You won't